So we have most of the main components done, and now it's time to change our dozer's barefoot look. We're going to create the tracks in this video. For that, I'm hiding all the other layers. I'm going to create these tracks on a new separate layer, starting with a primitive here. Now the reason for that separate layer is because these tracks, they're going to be a lot of objects, and it's really going to go quite high in poly count. So if I want to keep things easy to work with and quickly hide and unhide them, I want to keep them on a separate layer. It's just going to be a lot easier for me. So right now, just starting off with some simple modeling. I hid everything else also so it's easier for me to see the blueprints. I know this is incredibly blurry, but there's plenty of reference pictures on this, and it's not exactly all that complicated as a model. Though we'll have to spend some time on it. It's a part that will get repeated a lot, so I think it will benefit from a decent model. So once I have this basic shape, I'm going to add a few subdivisions in there, and then add these extra ones to extrude this part. Now the whole idea behind the shape of these tracks is that they provide really good grip for the bulldozer to be able to move through earth and dirt. So we have these upstanding ridges that gravel into the dirt. So I'm taking these and chamfering them, and the reason for that is there's like a slight open hole at the front here, which is interesting in terms of model. It's this half circle that's cut out of the model. And just realized that it might be better to add a few more subdivisions first. It's going to be easier for me to work with, making sure the curve still stays there. And making sure to select the bottom as well, so that when I perform an inset, it's going to happen on both sides. So I do my inset here. I'm just going to work on one half here. We can just use symmetry when I have to. It's just easier if I work on one side. If I have to spend attention to both sides, things can get out of hand, and they won't be similar anymore. So this is just trying to eyeball the circular shape in this track. And I'm going to try and do the same thing here though. But in the end, it's just better if I use symmetry. There we go. It saves a lot of work. Okay, so I'm going to select all of these, delete them, select all the other ones, delete them, select the open edges, then bridge those. And there we are. We've created the opening in this part of the tracks. You see, quite easy if you know how to put the polygons there. It's not all that hard. Just have to know what your flow should look like. Now, these tracks, as they see a lot of use, that means their edges won't be so sharp and defined anymore. They'll really be quite blunt in terms of their chamfering and smoothing. So I'm trying to get that in there as well. Now, it would just look strange if you'd have this really sharp, precise part that sees actually the most use and action of any part of the bulldozer. So that's why I'm trying to get this the blunt, rounded feel in the parts that touch the ground most of all. Try and do the same thing here. Like I said, watch out that this doesn't pose a problem. Right? Same thing here. Get that nice rounded feel in there. Then add this extra edge. Using edge constraints to move it, since as you can see, it doesn't play that nice with Connect. Really trying to get that round feel in there. So once again, sometimes you have to think about the wear that a part sees, even to decide how you're going to model things. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now we need to move these back slightly. We get our rounding there as well. Okay, so I'm going to align the pivot to the center of the object here, well, the center of the symmetry, because, of course, I have to turn on use axis center as snapping point, because that will make sure that my symmetry works nicely. Symmetry of the correct axis. There we go. That's the base part of our tracks. There's still another important part attached to it, which are the actual, I'd call them the links. The parts that link the tracks together. And they're a tad more complex than the actual pads that touch the ground. So I had a good reference picture of it, and I studied it pretty closely about how they attach. This part, since it has a lot of interaction with other parts, it's really, really important that you understand how it fits together and how it will exactly move and interact with its similar counterparts. So there are actually two of these pink blocks. They're not exactly blocks, they're like the upstanding link parts. There are two of them. There's one on the left, one on the right. And towards the back, they get slightly smaller, so they slot into the front of the next one in front of them. You'll see when we get there. I'm just trying to get the shape right. The front is rounded because, well, they need to rotate, so there has to be some rounding to make sure that this rotation can work. Started off with a low number of segments, just adding a few more. But it's not exactly rounded. It's more of a curve in there. No reason why they gave it this exact curve, but I'm just trying to mimic this here. Right, so I'm adding quite a few to it, but that's just because I want to get the exact curve right. Now you could say, why have you left these subdivisions in there? Well, the reason for that is there are long capsule/oval shaped holes in here, and I need the segments to be able to implement these holes. Selecting all of these, selecting these, doing an inset, scaling them down slightly. And once I have that done, I need to make sure that I can get some rounding on the top. Also, one very difficult part, and this really took me a lot of study. I didn't just start this right away. I studied the reference quite closely for quite a while. I must say, this was the part that required me studying the most reference of all, because it's really complicated how it fits together. There's this hole that on the one side starts on the wider part of the link, and then on the other side of the hole, as you can see at the back where I deleted some polygons, it ends on a less wide part of the hole. So it's kind of strange how it fits together. I'm not exactly sure, but well, that's just how it goes. So I really want to make sure that the flow here works and fits together. Obviously, this isn't perfect yet, right? There's still an n-gon in there. But I'm just gonna have to live with that. Well, not an n-gon, but the loops are messed up actually. The loop will it won't loop around itself. It will loop into the one next to it. So if I use the Swift loop, it might give me some problems there. So now I'm just creating that special shape in there. Just getting them together slightly. Nothing too hard. Just trying to get the generic shape in there first before I do anything else. Add the edges that are important for the smoothing. I'm just going to set these all in the center. Scale them down, scale them up. That way you can get them uniform in their distances toward the edge. Trick you've probably seen me do a lot now. Just scale something down with edge constraints and then scale it back up, or move it against its edge and then move it back out. So, it didn't work perfect here though. I mean, with scale and with multiple selections, it doesn't play that nice. So I'm just trying to fix it a little bit. So selecting all these edges, because obviously there's still a part that needs to be created. And this is the one that will actually slot into the one in front of it. You can see it's not going to slot yet with how I created it. For that reason, I need to move this one in like that. And now I hope you can now imagine how these things will fit together. And I need to make sure that they will actually fit together and work, because I do want my tracks to be able to rotate around. There's a big hole in the front here for the axle that holds the two links together. Obviously, I need to create this hole because it's quite visible on all the screenshot. Makes for an interesting detail as well. So loop tools again, don't know that one. Then using the align to fix the mess that loop tools has created. And then realign it, and there we are. Just trying to get the position right now. And now just quite simple, some scaling, some extruding, insetting, whatever. I want to get that shape in there. Okay, so there's a slight recessed center there. I'm going to create that as well. Cap that. And then connect these to make sure there's no n-gon there. Use extrude to put some hardening on those edges. Fill that up. Use grow, and I just want to make it slightly bigger so I'm sure that it's visible enough. Okay, so that detail at the front is working nicely. Still need to do some work here at the back. This is not done by far. The shape at the rear isn't done. Also, something I can't forget here is making sure that there's an edge. Extruded. Well, there's an extruded ridge here. Just another small detail. It's not too hard to model as well. So the back of this part is also slightly rounded because, as I said, they will rotate towards each other. So some vertex pushing to get that correct curve in there. You might say, you'll see it in a minute, now that I added these control edges here, and first, they're not exactly control edges, for some parts they are, but they're for even some extra detail. You might say at the top right corner of this pink part, you might think that it's not rounded correctly, but it looks like that in the reference, so don't worry. Okay, so there's a turbo smooth, and it's looking okay already. You just need to add a few more edges where things get smoothed too much. Cutting these on. There we are. Fix the n-gon. Still a little bit too smooth where that one hole transfers into the rear part. This needs to sit back a little bit. There we are. That should smooth better now. And one at the back, of course. That does look better. Now I need to position it correctly. And you can see the reason for that hole being there is so that the track can actually bend inwards as well as outwards. And making it a whole bunch fatter because, well, that's the part that needs to slot into that hole. So I want to make sure that it lines up. I'm actually adding some edges here because I'm noticing that they're not really playing very nice with the smoothing, so I can improve this by just creating more segments. It looks decent now. Okay, so another part in here, there are these, I think these are, how would I call them? I think clamps that are bolted onto that black plate at the bottom, and they hold those pink parts. Well, they won't be pink in a minute. They will hold those pink parts into place. So you can actually take the track apart into, I think they should be about 5 parts or something, 5-6 parts. You can take them apart, and that way it's just easier than having them as one single part. Better for maintenance also. So you see this brown thing will be attached to the black plate at the bottom with a nut. And when you loosen the nut, you can take out that brown part and you can actually remove the pink part. Of course, an inset here to make sure that the rounding works correctly. Once I'm happy with that part, I'm going to move it over to the other one. Then check how it looks in Turbo Smooth because I'm quite sure it'll look okay. I mean, it's such a simple part, I don't really need to check it that much. So now I'm attaching everything. And there we are. That should be the basis for my tracks. using symmetry. That does look pretty cool. There's a little problem in the center here though. As you can see, I forgot a slight issue with my inset. And what we need to do now is, well, first off, I need to add the bolts on the top there, but I'll do that in a moment. I won't even have to show you that. I mean, it's just copying the model and putting them into place. But once we finish this model, we are going to duplicate them around that spline to create the actual tracks. So just trying to get the shape right here, tweaking it slightly. There we are, that looks about right. Okay. Now the thing is, I'm aligning my pivot point of this object to the center of that axle that I just modeled. And how did I do that? I selected the center circle, detached it, centered the pivot to that object, and then aligned the main object's pivot with that detached object. That way I'm sure my tracks will rotate around the correct point. Then I'm going to reset X-form. It's pretty important I do that because the orientation of this part is really important. And once that is done, pay close attention. This part is a bit tricky and difficult. Making sure that everything is set up correctly. I'm duplicating it, hiding the other one since I want to work with a copy. I'm going to pull out the spline that will form the shape along which the tracks are moving. Taking this spline, duplicating it to the correct layer. I'm going to turn off the rendering. And now I'm going to make use of a little script. It's called Train Maker. You can find it online or it will be included with the DVD. If you open Train Maker, you can actually create trains with this, tracks that, train wagons that run around a track, which is the spline, but you can also use it for tank tracks. And as you can see, just selecting a few options, I have my tracks on. There's a slight problem, they're inverted, so I'm going to mess around with the options a little bit. And I don't need to tell you all the exact settings here. I mean, you can see what I'm doing. And just try to mess around a little bit with it yourself. As you can see, the pivot point is giving me some slight problems here. So I'm going to go back into the model and move these things around a little bit so that this will work. See, if I rotate the model around, I need to turn on angle snap. And well, obviously what happened now is the symmetry is hiding my thing. So I need to go back into symmetry and turn off that. There we are. This looks about correct, right? This is the start for my tracks. They are sitting a little bit too close together. So for that, I'm going to go back into my Train Maker. I'm going to change a few options to make sure that they line up nicely, just reducing the number of tracks here. And they move out slightly while you're adjusting this. And once again, let me tell you, if you don't use this script, this is hell to do. You have to do everything manually. This script makes things so much easier. So if you want to do these tank tracks, get a hold of that script and use it. You can do it manually, but trust me, I've done it. Don't want to do that again. So I'm rotating the tracks around. The problem was they were running in the wrong direction. They actually need to run the other way. And then the problem is that they were rotating around the wrong point. So I'm moving them to rotate around the back point, which I think is better. With that done, I'm going to add the nuts like I told you. I just noticed that I forgot it. Just so caught up in creating the tracks, which is actually quite fun. I mean, you created this simple object by itself, and then once you duplicate along the tracks, it looks really cool. So just taking this nut. Like I said, everything is rounded on these tracks. So I'm going to do that same thing here. Make sure the nut is slightly more round because it sees so much wear that the edges are really worn down to a really rounded shape. Scale it up slightly because they have to be really chunky. And move them down in here. And they sit in this sort of, they don't sit straight. There's a slight slanted line in how they're connected together. So I attach them. There we are. And if I look back at my tracks, look at that. That looks a lot cooler already with all those nuts on it. Okay. So that's pretty much how I created these tracks. Trust me, you won't get it right the first time with the pivot and the script and everything. It requires some tweaking, just some fiddling around with the settings, the pivot point, everything. but you'll get it right eventually. It's not that hard, and it's quite fun to do, actually. So to create the second track, I'm just using the script again and recreating it. Now that I know the settings, it actually remembers them. It goes quite fast. So there you go, bam, there's another one. And the script works with opening and closing tracks, so you can have multiple ones. So that's done. And I'm going to hide this one. Then unhide the rest of the bulldozer. Now, the thing is, this is starting to run slightly slowly on my computer, and it's quite powerful, but I'm running in the millions of polygons here. So what I'm going to do is select these tracks. And I'm going to reduce the number of iterations on them. First of all, that means there will be a lot less polygons on them. Turn up the render iterations, so when I'm viewing it in the viewport, it's less detailed than when I render. And I might also try light trick on them. Select all of them and go into object properties and then show as box. And that means you won't see them in the viewport because I wasn't happy with the performance at iterations of 1. So that's a trick you can do. Not sure if I want to do this. It doesn't look as cool anymore. And that's it for the tracks.